they take that literal meaning to something that dates back 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And then in some cases, when men act in a different way, you hear the overused word of simp or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, to
Yeah.
use to
Yeah.
describe the guy
Yeah.
who's not portraying the role that the man was supposed to, the norm of.
Yeah.
But I always say, there's so many norms. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So, with me today, I have Austin Molina. Austin's actually one of my former students from some time ago. I won't say how long because that would date my age. But he was in my class years ago. And so today we're going to have a conversation about masculinity and manhood, and then we'll just kind of see where the conversation goes. So we've known each other for a while, so we're just going to kind of free flow and talk and just kind of see where it goes, that sort of stuff. So before we get into it, I'm going to let Austin introduce himself and then we'll get going.
Hey everyone, I'm Austin Molina. I go to VCOM. It's a medical school up in South Carolina. I was in Dr. Smart's class. Again, I won't say how long.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah.
I think I took my freshman speech course with him, and it was a good little intro into the world of education and a great way to meet him. I am a second lieutenant in the Army. I was just sworn in yesterday, and I'm actually expecting a baby girl.
So you had a lot of surprises in store for me. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's about it. I graduated from Texas UNT with a degree in biology and chemistry, and I excited to be here today.
All right. So with that surprise, let's go ahead and I'm going to change my first question that I had for you.
Okay. I figured so.
Yeah. So now tell me the whole idea of fatherhood. What does that mean to you now?
So I've thought a lot about this, and from my previous expectations of what it meant to me to be a man in today's societal standards, and even back then with my perception of my family, with their traditions, and me playing sports my entire life, there's some set of standards to where I had to get back up when I was hurt or not show emotion when necessary. And so I've thought a lot about how to be a father to where my daughter could be understanding her feelings and understanding of other people's perception of their feelings. So right now it's a big thing for me to just be the leader I need to be for her in the developing years, especially.
Okay.
And it's a lot to kind of take in and to understand, especially because you're still trying to figure it out yourself of how to be the best you. I feel like that's how most everyone is. I think it's just kids having kids most of the time. And I think really when I start to pick up on how intuitive she is or whatever she may be, or what she likes and what she dislikes, I can really kind of gauge myself and what I need to do for her to be the best version of herself.
Okay, good. So you said a couple of things that I want to unpack. And let's talk about, because you used feelings, which is attached to obviously emotions, and that's something that a lot of men struggle with. Did you ever struggle with that between the sports world and then what you were learning at home and your parents' values? Because you brought that up as well.
Yeah, and what was pretty unique in my case is my father was actually a coach. He was a trainer. He trained. Like I would go home after school, and then I would swim in the pool or run a mile with a weighted vest and weighted ankle weights on. And he was my coach. He made me call him coach on the baseball field, not dad or father or whatever it may be. And so there were some disconnects when I started like getting out of my sports world into different friend groups or even into relationships. not shutting down when people ask me questions, or actually showing some sort of emotional availability. And not to get too deep into it, but like when my parents divorced when I was probably 16, and it took a lot of understanding for me to realize that they were better off not being together. And that emotional understanding really came from an idea that my father was more of a stoic, of typical man brought up in his generation. And my mom was more stoic, but she was understanding. She would ask my father why questions a lot. She would get at how he was feeling and why he was feeling it. And he would just shut down at that point. And I understood that I had to make a relationship work, or something of that nature, any relationship, friendship, teacher, student relationship, whatever it may be. I had to really understand what I was feeling at the time I was feeling it.
That's a really good revelation to have at the age you had it. And obviously, as you're growing older and realizing that as well. And that's what a lot of men are not able to connect with. Because in society, a lot of times when we hear feelings and emotions, it's almost like men are not supposed to have that.
Yeah, definitely.
And not supposed to express that. Because it almost seems like sometimes it's a challenge to their masculinity, or what
Yeah.
it is to be a man. So what would you say? Well, what would you say you learned from your father?
Um,
You talked about the stoic part of it, but what else would you say you learned?
and so I did learn a lot of valuable father. I mean, medical school and going this route is not easy. You got to be determined, at least in some sort of your goal for your future. And so with that comes the challenge of being brave in the face of adversity. And that's one thing he taught me. He taught me in kind of the typical masculinity mindset of not to ever give up. I think is flawed, and like you have to give up at some point if you know what's best for you.
Yeah.
He taught me a lot about not to give up and push past things that I need to that I want to see come true, and that has helped me a lot. It's also hurt me in some ways. It's kind of made me become a perfectionist in some aspect, and which is itself a dead end and everything. But he really did help me a lot with pushing past what I need, these barriers to become the better me.
Yeah. So you also said you feel sometimes like we're kids having kids. Explain that a little bit
Yeah.
more, because I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I just kind of see that most of the time, I mean, especially growing up and coming into different professions, most of the time people no one idea what they're doing. And if you asked anyone on this planet, I mean, a majority of the people will have an idea of why we're here and what our purpose is, but most of them, they're going to be different answers. They're going to just allude to the point that we really have no idea what we're doing. And even with kids, we can break it down further to where we don't know what we're doing with them until we kind of see them grow up.
Yeah.
And we kind of get in a rhythm, or the kid, the mother and the father role. And it's just the idea that we really have half the time no idea what we're doing.
Yeah. So you also talked about leadership, and a lot of times you hear the term man of the house, right? So first explain what you meant by leadership in terms of explaining masculinity or manhood. And then what is your definition of who's the man of the house? When you say that, what does that mean? And perhaps what role does leadership play in that?
Okay. With leadership, I really think in manhood, it's more a part of the older idea of manhood. Because I mean, everybody wants to be a leader, of course, or some people don't actually, and that's flaw in that term or using it as that broad definition, because some people just want to follow or some people just want to be by themselves. And that idea, letting those people, that those groups of people do whatever they seem fit or whatever works best for them to be the best version of themselves, that is a good idea of the word manhood, or even the word leadership, following your own goals and your own self-interest in that aspect. But with the man of the household, that is probably a very outdated term. I mean, you can see it in today's standards. Maybe in like more traditionally based cultures, you might have that. See that across like different parts of the world. Maybe Japan, maybe Mexico, maybe China, maybe areas like that. And even still, then when you have more of a melting pot in a society, I see that term and that idea kind of be diluted more and more. Because you have advantage people, all kinds, minorities, majorities, whatever it may be, coming up to the actual goal, what they want it to be, and they're providing for themselves or for their family, for their kids, for the husband. And the husband maybe it's a stay-at-home. My father was actually a stay-at-home father. And so my mom provided. She would go to nursing school at night and then work during the day. And she had me at 18 years old and my brother at 20. And so she was really young providing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of my view and my perspective kind of gets distorted from a lot of my friends and my closed, majority white, rich school, that I was poor, that my father didn't work and my mother did. My perception was always different based off everyone else's, because the man of the household was my mother. And it kind of threw me off, but it kind of made me understand that we're not limited in one aspect, even in definition based. We're able to through these barriers, glass ceilings, whatever it may be, and be the best provider we need to be for our family.
So with your mom being the breadwinner, right? How has that impacted your perception of woman per se?
With my fiance, I mean, we've been together 8 years, and I remember one thing in your class that I do remember, and you were talking about like the subject of partners, and really implied the idea that someone needs to emotionally and intellectually stimulate you. And I was like, yeah, I know that is a factor in a relationship. And what she did, my fiance did for me, intellectually stimulated me, is that she broke a lot of gender norms, and especially being from a Hispanic household. Traditionalism and religion, at least Catholic, being Catholic, was a big traditional sect for what a woman needs to do and how they need to behave, or the head of the household, the male needs to behave, or whatever it may be. And so I constantly had my perceptions changed and broken and reformed to this idea that women aren't what a lot of society is saying they are. So with my mom and my fiance, they both constantly did this to me and really made me understand the idea that women aren't labeled or considered. There's just this one group that can do one thing, and men aren't either. And it's insane that we place these ideas that one group or another gender, whatever it may be, is late or is constrained just to this idea of what they can be. And so it really gave me the idea that for everyone, to where I can be what I want to be if I can find myself pushing past this idea. Because my mom did, because my fiance did. And so it gave me a good revelation when I was young that women aren't this cookie cutter version. They're from the 50s.
And that's what that's what some men, especially depending on the examples that they've had in their life, that's what they expect. And so when they hear head of the household, they take that literal meaning to something that dates back 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And then in some cases, when men act in a different way, you hear the overused word of simp or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, to
Yeah.
use to
Yeah.
describe the guy
Yeah.
who's not portraying the role that the man was supposed to, the norm of.
Yeah.
But I always say, there's so many norms, and if we had kept a lot of things normal, we would have been in a very bad place in society. If we
Yeah.
just stuck with norms, then we would be in a really bad place in society. And yeah, as you reference relationships, I always believe you need, whether it's friendship or romantic relationships, you need somebody who emotionally and intellectually stimulates you, like
Yeah.
to keep it keeps you fresh, it keeps you new, they challenge you, they push you, they support you,
Yeah.
because based on my experience, money and stuff like sex does not keep a relationship together. Uh,
Yeah.
as much as you would hear about that a lot of times in music and all that sort of stuff, it takes a whole something way deeper than that to actually
Yeah.
keep people together. So let's talk a little bit about masculinity specifically. You've probably heard the term toxic masculinity,
Yeah.
right? How do you feel about that term, and what do you think masculinity really is? Because that's where the
Yeah.
challenge comes
So
sometime.
yeah. And yeah, the version of like my perspective is so different
Yeah,
from,
yeah.
and I can't blame them for doing what they've been taught to do. It's so hard to break out of that um, mindset, just to find a new perspective of life, especially as you get older. It's just
Mhm.
you find opinions that back up what you really believe in. We really start to get these biases that really kind of dwell in on ourselves, and so it's very difficult uh, to break that mindset. But the toxic, you know, it has such a negative connotation to it, and it is there. And what it means, I think, at least in my perspective, is that it's outdated, and that not just that's outdated, you're placing constraints on people before you even give them a chance to be themselves. And
Mhm.
with the man of the household, I really think that's a term that uh, you're not allowing the women in your household to be the best them, to go out and get a STEM degree or a literary arts degree or whatever they may be, or go into
I'm so
the
glad you said that. But go ahead, and I'll jump in at the end.
okay, yeah. And so these constraints you really place on people before you even give them the chance to be them is really, it's a whole mindset that digresses and devolves humanity as a whole. I mean, the whole aspect of, and I'm getting off topic a little bit, but like opening up education to more people, maybe making it cheaper or free even. You're given more of the percentage or more of the population the advantage to get a degree and become something. And then therefore you're just creating this positive feedback loop to where you're having more people becoming more successful, bettering your society, bettering the country in your world. And then it's just going to keep spreading in that sense. And that toxic masculinity idea, a lot of the time constrains that. It really sets back a lot of standards and goals that we could be as a whole.
Yeah. Sometimes I think the whole idea of being toxic is I am different to you, so therefore you label me. And a lot of times when people, I started off I like to start off my classes by talking about the word different, something I've incorporated over the years, and to stress that different doesn't mean bad. Because so many times when we hear the word different or difference, it means that if we're not alike, then something must be wrong with me or something must be wrong with you. Why can't it just be that we have a different perspective? And
Yeah.
to follow up on your what you said earlier, growing up in high school, growing up in the Caribbean in high school, food and nutrition was for girls. So
Oh, yeah.
that subject area was, only girls studied food and nutrition. And I was thinking about this. I was walking a couple weeks ago and I was thinking, why did we do that? Because food and nutrition is for any human being who wants to who wants to understand how your body works, who wants to be able to eat well and create meals. That's not limited. But when you think of it in terms of the role of the man and the role of the woman, you understand why, even in the education system, right, with very smart people, they still saw food and nutrition as being something specifically for women, right? And not for men. Why would you not want men to understand food and nutrition when we live off of food and what is nutrition? But it,
Yeah.
it goes to that line of thinking, and that's not me necessarily pointing fingers at anyone, but I realize how that has. So one of the plans I have is to the high school that I went to, because I went to the high school that was considered really the worst high school. One of the plans I have is I want to jumpstart a program there and a scholarship there pretty soon. And one of the things is to really stress on this whole idea of, well, food and nutrition is for boys too. Like if you want to go be a doctor, I would think studying food and nutrition might not hurt, depending
Yeah.
on what
Help a lot.
yeah, it could help a lot, right? Especially you have that mindset and that curiosity from the age, from being a teenager. So yes, you brought that up. That just kind of got back to me. But that goes to show how norms are not always good.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, because if a lot of things were the way they were 50, 60 years ago, society would not have the improvements. And difference, I think of difference as diversity, not as bad.
Yeah.
And so, as you said, sometimes if we allow some people, specifically men, to kind of just evolve and be who they choose to be, I think it's just better for everyone, instead of trying to put people into boxes. So my question now is, what do you think we could do to help? This is a big question, and maybe you're not in a position to tackle it, or at least not at this point. But what are some things that you would suggest that could be done in high schools, or maybe what I could perhaps teach in college classrooms about masculinity? What would you suggest? What thoughts come to mind when I say something like that?
Yeah. So I'll try my best to tackle it.
Yeah.
Again, with what I mean, it always starts with education. Most start with a fundamental understanding of what you're talking about. And so masculinity, I would have an idea of, like, you probably do talk about it in your class, or I don't really ever remember learning about it in high school. It's more of a absorbed type of
Yeah.
education. You get it secondary from your perceptions.
Yeah.
And it's too geologically approached. You really understand it from where you grow up at and your family. And like, you could break it down in America, that you have several regions in America. All, you could say, maybe have different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Break it down to institutions, business, education, medicine. They all have different cultures and how they approach problems. So it is a tough task to tackle, but I think ultimately the best thing to really do is put the information out there. And that's the best step we could always do, because I don't ever really remember being taught it. But again, home ec in high school, and
Yeah.
I was one of the only guys in there, me and my
Yeah.
friend. And we did take it for a blow-off class. I know how to sew, which translated to me being able to suture now. And I know how to cook, which then I started getting involved with my cooking and with my nutritional planning. And it really has helped a lot,
Yeah.
especially medical school, because we do learn nutrition heavy. We learn the fundamental biochemical processes of every nutritionally sound thing, so we can teach our patients
Mm-hmm.
how to be best for them. And so the idea, we do see it a lot in cultures, and even in our culture itself, is masculinity is really more of a understood and absorbed process. And so I would just say education, putting the information out there is the best
Yeah.
way to really take the problem.
So I'm definitely going to tackle it. I'm working on a book right now that doesn't have to do with that. But after I'm finished with that one, then I've already started writing the book about masculinity. So one of my goals is to talk to 100 men of all different sexualities, religions, races, ethnicities, coming from different parts of the world about what masculinity means. And at some point, I'm going to go back and watch my own YouTube videos and take notes. But it's fun, right? I'll go back and
Yeah.
take notes and put together something. So I'm also starting to incorporate it more in the classroom as well. I feel like it's something that needs to be talked about. And I see a lot of men struggling with identity issues, especially people who, I don't want to use the word toxic because I don't really too much believe in that term, but just people who are misguided based on, the examples that they've had and their perception of what malehood is or manhood or masculinity is. So, that's why I wanted to chat with you today. So anything else you want to say before we wrap it up? This has been good.
Yeah, real quick with the personality thing. I mean, I can't think of anyone ever that has gone through a phase that they thought were cool based on their peers and what was cool in today's what the stars were doing or cultures were doing that was just so not close to home, and you would really just copy it blindly. And I mean, that's what a lot of the perception of being a man is those blind passed down old wives' tales that you have to see for some reason. But it's once you break the shackles and understand that you are who you are and you can be anyone you want, and you're not constrained to one idea or the other. You just ultimately just got to be good and not really be an ass to other people around you.
Yeah.
And that's a big reason of really, or being a man is being understanding of others' perspectives. That's the main point I want to get at.
Yeah, and as you said, it's really education. It's getting outside of your comfort zone. It's getting outside of the neighborhood, that the only neighborhood you've known, with the only set of friends who just a lot of times reinforce what you already know, or stereotypes and that sort of stuff. So the education is key. And the education, sometimes when people hear education, they think it has to happen in a college classroom. Wow, YouTube could educate you.
Yeah.
It could happen in so many different spectrums. So thank you. Don't go anywhere. We're going to chat after I close this off. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Until the next time, be good. Peace.